Indeed, the blessings are a big deal. So, we begin with Reuben when he says, "You are my firstborn, my might, the first fruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power." And this expression, the first fruits of my strength, we can see this also elsewhere in Scripture. Psalm 78, struck down every firstborn in Egypt, the first fruits of their strength. In the LXX, this reads slightly differently. Doesn't paint him in any better light. It says, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, you my strength and the first of my children, hard to be endured, hard and self-willed." Imagine these, just some of these blessings. I just imagine them sitting there like anticipating, expectantly, and because this is what he says. He says, "Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence." And he gives his reason: "Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it, you went up to my couch." So, unstable as water. This word here, pakaz, we see it also here. Lasciviousness, wantonness, none of these things are particularly wonderful, are they? And they come from this other word, 6348. So, unstable as water from 6348, which is this word, to bubble up or froth. But it also means to be unimportant and light, not great things there, eh? But also to be wanton, to be reckless, to be haughty even, and boastful. We see it used in Judges. Abimelech hired vain and light persons. Zephaniah, her prophets are light and treacherous persons. None of this is great, is it? If you're sitting there listening to this blessing and you're like, what? So what happened that caused Reuben to be described in such a negative way? "Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence. Because you went up to your father's bed, you defiled it. You went up to my couch." And the incident referred to here actually took place after the death of Rachel. We read in Genesis 35, "And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, 'Do not fear, for you have another son.' As her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin." So Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. And it says, "And Israel journeyed on." So this is just after Rachel, his favorite wife, has died, pitched his tent beyond the Tower of Adair. And while Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. So, not great, eh? Now the sons of Yaakov were 12. Next, we have a listing of the 12 sons, which makes a note of who they were born to. So, this terrible act, he's gone in, he's laid with Bilhah, which was Rachel's servant, after Rachel has died, after the father is probably pretty distraught. Then we have this listing, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, point being made of that, and then we just have the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and then it goes on and gives us the rest. So what did this act represent? This going into his father's wife. Was it just a case of Reuben unable to control himself in the moment? Was he just mad away with lust? As we've seen, he is described as unstable. So is that suggesting that that was what this was about? But maybe not. It is worth noting that sleeping with his father's wife would have been seen as an act of usurpation, trying to establish himself above his father. I am the man now. I am more important. And we do see something similar described in 2 Samuel. So, 2 Samuel 15. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate, and when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, the king being David, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right. There is no man designated by the king to hear you." So he's trying to weasel his way in and make himself seem appealing to the people who were on their way to see the king, his father David. Then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land, then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." Which is a nonsense anyway, because if you've got two people who are arguing about something and you're the judge, you're definitely going to displease one of them, aren't you? And whenever a man came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. So he's ingratiating himself to the people, and we'll see what his motives for this were. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Now the backstory to this: Absalom had a sister called Tamar. There was big trouble in the family when Amnon, the oldest son of King David, raped Tamar, Absalom's sister. When Absalom found out what had happened to his sister, he plotted revenge. 2 years later, Absalom got his servants to get Amnon drunk, and then they murdered him. King David mourned many days for his son. And then Absalom fled to Geshur, and David, although longing to see Absalom again, could not forgive him. Obviously, he's murdered his other son, Amnon. Now, Joab, the commander of David's armies, tried to resolve the problem by inviting a wise woman to see David. This problem that he had of, he longed for Absalom, he just found it difficult to forgive him. Joab steps in and invites this woman in and tells her what to say and concocts this big story to try and change the king's heart. And indeed, at the end of this, the king said to Joab, when he discovers Joab is behind it, "Behold, now I grant this. Bring back the young man Absalom." Go on then. I can see what you were trying to do here. Now, after getting his servants to burn Joab's field, this is Absalom. He wants the king's ear, and Joab keeps ignoring him. And this is the kind of person he is. He gets his servant to burn Joab's field to get his attention. It's like, but after all this, he gets to see the king. Okay. So what we have here is a son who is dissatisfied, we see, with his father. All we read of King David's reaction to the incident with Tamar is that he was very angry. Okay. Clearly, Absalom didn't feel that this offered justice, which is why he went on to go and kill Amnon. So Absalom, angry with his father and his half-brother, he took matters into his own hands. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And then we read, "And a messenger came to David saying, 'The hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom.' So he has his meeting with the king. That's when he goes out and gets all his chariots and his men, and he starts hanging around the city gate and getting everybody on board. And David realizes something is afoot, and a messenger tells him they've all gone after him. Then David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, 'Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape for us from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword.' So, great concern. David has to flee because he realizes Absalom is after him. And the king's servants said to the king, 'Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king decides.' So the king went out and all his household after him, and the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. So everybody legs it because Absalom's coming, but he just leaves these 10 concubines. Now Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And Absalom said to Ahithophel, 'Give your counsel, what shall we do? Now we're here, what am I going to do? I'm in Jerusalem, my father, the king, has fled, this is going really well, what shall I do?' Ahithophel said to Absalom, 'Go in to your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father, and the hands of all who were with you will be strengthened.' So that's interesting, isn't it? Go in, sleep with all these concubines, your father's concubines, and that'll make everybody who's with you probably think, 'Yay, this is great, he really is the man. The hands of all who are with you will be strengthened.' So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now, in those days, so this Ahithophel, the counsel that Ahithophel gave was as if one consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel esteemed, both by David and by Absalom. So this occurs. And it was the ultimate act of usurpation. Absalom enters Jerusalem to fully establish himself as the king, and this is how he's advised to act. And of course, for his actions there will be consequences. We read, Joab took 3 javelins in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. He's cycling. He was riding through. We were talking about cycling before. He wasn't cycling. He was on his horse or his donkey. And he got his hair caught in the tree. And Joab, who features heavily in this story, comes and thrusts him through with the javelin. Okay, so that's consequences for him and his act of usurpation. But let us consider David. This incident with the concubines takes place on David's rooftop, which is where his dealings with Bathsheba began. 2 Samuel 11:2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. King David sent for Bathsheba. He sleeps with her. She becomes pregnant. And in order to cover up his sin, David sent Bathsheba's husband Uriah to certain death in battle. And Nathan, who's this prophet, he comes and he confronts the king. And he says, why have you despised the word of Jehovah to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and have taken his wife to be your wife and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you've despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says Jehovah, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. Indeed, we've just read Absalom. And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this son. Exactly what we've just read. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. Wow. As we have seen, it happened exactly as prophesied. So again, we have David sinned and there were consequences. Now, if we go back to Reuben, it came to pass when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Israel heard it. Now the sons of Yaakov were 12. A similar act would be seen as an act of usurpation. For Reuben, there were also consequences. 1 Chronicles 5 says, the sons of Reuben, who was the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's couch, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph and the son of Joseph, the son of Israel, so that he could not be enrolled as the oldest son. So his prestige as the firstborn was taken from him. And indeed, Genesis 49, Yaakov actually says to him, you're as unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, which was what the firstborn would have normally had. And he tells him why, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it. And I think it's interesting that the incident with Reuben and Bilhah occurs after the birth of Benjamin to the favored wife Rachel. And that the Torah then gives us a list of who was born to who, which includes a reminder that Reuben was the firstborn. It's like giving you like a bit of a hint. It's like saying, okay, Reuben was the firstborn, but you know what? The favorite wife was Rachel. Joseph was the favorite son, and now she's having another son who's going to be the favorite as well. And this kind of like frames this event. Of course, it was Rachel's children that were favored. And I've no doubt that this would have been difficult for Reuben to accept. As the firstborn, he was supposed to enjoy preeminence, but all the favor seemed to go to Rachel's children. So this probably griped him. But sadly, his attempt to change things brought dire consequences. He's probably thinking, oh, you know, we can only assume what he might be thinking, but I don't think his situation was pleasing to him. Certainly it wasn't, because he felt the need to go and do this horrible act and to try and establish his authority under his own steam. Now, about the tribe of Reuben. When the Israelites began to enter the promised land, the tribe of Reuben, along with the tribe of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh, requested to inherit the land east of the Jordan River. You can see it on the map here. At first, Moshe objected, and he said, how could they take rest from war, going over the other side and fighting with everyone? War with the rest of the Israelites, went on to conquer Canaan, and saying they were discouraging the other Israelites from going in to take the land Jehovah had given them. You just want to settle in and you don't want to get involved. He compared them, the Reubenites, the Gadites, to their fathers before them who had not wanted to enter the promised land due to fear. However, the men of fighting age promised to help the other tribes to conquer their land, and thus were given the land east of the Jordan as their possession. So they said, no, that's not what it's all about. We're not chickening out. We just like the land there. We'll come in and fight with you. So everyone's like, well, that's cool. Now, following a similar trajectory to their namesake, the tribe of Reuben started off in a position of honor and strength, always listed first among the 12 tribes of Israel. But just as Yaakov prophesied, the tribe did not maintain an honored position. Indeed, Moshe's blessing for the tribe of Reuben: let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. Words that maybe suggest Reuben was in or going to be in decline. In the LXX it says, let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be a number. Now, also worth noting, there was no prominent leader of any kind that emerged from the tribe of Reuben, no judges or anything like that. And aside from being referenced in a list, including the other tribes in Revelation 7:5, the tribe is not mentioned anywhere in the New Testament. Of course, in Revelation 7, we see, don't harm the tree until we've sealed the servants of God on their foreheads, 144,000 from every tribe of the sons of Israel, and they are mentioned here, 12,000 from Reuben. So what we've gone through there is we see David, who took something that was not his. He took another man's wife, and he's like, I want her. Okay, now this represents exerting your will over the will of Jehovah. It's established that this is this man's wife, and that's the way things are. But I'm not satisfied with that. I'm going to exert my will over the situation, and I'm going to take something that actually doesn't belong to me. In a sense, what he's doing is, and what people do when they do this, it's like exalting themselves. Lord, this is the way things are, and the way, but I'm not having that. I'm going to change things. It's going to be the way I want it. And he abused his position and his authority as a king. He faced the consequences. His kingship was threatened, and what he did in secret was repaid to him in public. Then we have Absalom trying to take something that was not his also. Trying to exalt himself, wants to be the big cheese, usurp the authority. Dissatisfied, trying to usurp his father, but he also faced consequences. And then we come to Reuben. Similar, it went with Reuben. He tried to establish himself, to usurp authority, tried to exalt himself, you say, and things went wrong for him too. We read about trying to exalt yourself in Scripture. Yeshua points out the unrighteous behavior of the Pharisees who love the glory that comes from men. Then he tells the crowd, who is the greatest among them? This is Yeshua speaking. He says, they do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. And they love the place of honor at feasts and the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces and being called rabbi by others. You can get the flavor of what he's saying, can't you? But he says, the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And elsewhere in James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. So, whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Interesting. One way we can be guilty of exalting ourselves is in trying to put others down. Looking down our noses at others, maybe even bad-mouthing them. Have you seen the state of them? Did you hear? Have you heard about some? Isn't that awful what they're up to? Aren't we great though? See what I'm saying? When we looked at Joseph, we noted that a slanderer is one who seeks to exalt themselves by making others look bad. He was a slanderer, he was proud, and Jehovah the refiner dealt with him. You consider all the things that he went through, pretty heavy going, but he was humbled. He tried to exalt himself, but he was humbled so that in due time he could be exalted. To be conformed to the image of his son is the process that he went through. Now, Yeshua tells a parable and he gives the same message. One Sabbath, when he went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. Now, he told the parable to those who were invited. When he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying it depended where you sat at the table. If you were closer to the fellow who was given the do, the do. I'm sure there's Americans who watch this sometimes and go, what's he on about? What's he talking about? He told the parable to those who were invited, and I noticed the way they picked places of honor. The further up the table you were, the greater the honor. Saying to them, when you were invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you, both will come and say to you, give your place to this person. Bit of a social faux pas. And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. You'll have to get up and walk to the bottom. But when you're invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. Same message. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. Reuben disrespected his father and committed an act that spoke of his trying to elevate his status, his trying to exalt himself. And as we've seen, the consequences were that he was humbled. You shall not have preeminence. The sad thing is that in the story of Joseph, he seems to be righteous when compared to his brothers. We see Yaakov sends Joseph to his brothers in Dothan, and they saw him afar off, and they said when he comes near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. But when Reuben heard of it, he rescued Joseph out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. He told them to throw Joseph in a pit, planning to return later to rescue the boy and restore him to Jacob. In Reuben's absence, Judah convinced the brothers to instead sell Joseph. And when they traveled to Egypt to purchase food, Joseph recognized them and tested them by accusing them of being spies. And not knowing who Joseph was, the brothers contributed their current distress to their previous actions against him. And indeed, it was Reuben who answered them, and he said, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy, but you did not listen to me? So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. And later we see Reuben put up his two sons as collateral, saying that Yaakov could kill them if he didn't return with Benjamin. This is when they need to go and get food. But that doesn't mean anything to Jacob. He's like, I'm not interested. The famine persists, though, and the men did return after Judah offered himself as a pledge for Benjamin's safety. So when Judah comes up and says it, Jacob's like, oh, seeing as it's you. Reuben's promise meant nothing to Yaakov. Judah, who was actually a key player in the mistreatment of Joseph, his pledge meant a lot more. And we just see that this act that he committed, it's just had this effect over seemingly all his dealings in his life, and even, as we see from the blessings, through to his descendants. And this is all to do with he tried to exalt himself, but whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And when we read this and we take note of it, we should bear in mind that this also is talking about this attitude that people have of looking down their noses and trying to defame other people in order to exalt themselves. Of course, we have the Korah rebellion, which is another attempt to usurp power. Who do we see involved? We see Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben. Indeed. And they rose up before Moshe. A number of people, 250 of the leaders, men of renown apparently. They assembled themselves together against Moshe and against Aaron and said to them, "You've gone too far, for in all the congregation, all in the congregation are holy, even every one of them. And Jehovah is among them. Why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Jehovah?" Interesting. Why do you exalt yourselves? These were men who were trying to usurp authority. And these are the ones who want to elevate themselves. Indeed, it tells us in Psalm 106 that they were jealous of Moses and Aaron. So, the Reubenites, again, involved in this act of usurpation. Of course, there were grave consequences. The 215 I see, and their fire pans, they all got it. They got the fire from heaven. And then obviously Numbers 16, they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. This is Korah and Dathan and Abiram and the people. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us also."